This is the only movie where the killer manages to kill 30 people and still walks away freely, even surrounded by the police. The brutality of the killer's methods was so extreme that a forensic expert with 30 years of experience would feel sick just by looking at it. Even the Blue Dragon Award-winning actor Lee Sung-min developed severe insomnia after filming this movie. What kind of terrifying case could have such a profound effect on an actor? Let's dive right into the plot. In 2019, the Korean police received a report from a fisherman who found a plastic bag containing a human hand near a river. The police quickly deployed hundreds of officers to conduct a thorough search. Soon, they discovered more. Under a black plastic bag, they found the severed head of a victim. After comparing records, they identified the victim as Mi-jin, a high school senior who had been missing for 17 days. Her eyes were still open, as if she had been longing for life. After hours of searching, the police finally recovered all of Mi-jin's body parts. The forensic examination revealed that Mi-jin had not been sexually assaulted. She had died 48 to 72 hours before being found, and during her life, she had suffered inhumane torture. All her joints were dislocated, and a surgical knife had cut deep into her ankle. The most disturbing fact was that Mi-jin had experienced all of this while she was still alive. This information horrified the police. They couldn't comprehend what kind of person could be so cruel to a young girl. During the case analysis, Detective Young expressed his concern. Based on the killer's brutal methods, Mi-jin might not have been the first victim. This could be the work of a serial killer. Hearing this, everyone felt uneasy. Detective Young was one of the best in the department, so his words carried weight. The chief immediately ordered both Detective Young's team and Detective Han's team to work together on this case, demanding the killer be caught before the media got wind of the details. However, this decision sparked a rivalry between the two teams. Both Detective Young and Detective Han were competing for a promotion to the chief's position, so the tension was high. After the meeting, Detective Young and his partner went to a church, as Mi-jin was last seen there. Detective Young felt uneasy. He feared the church might somehow be involved in Mi-jin's murder, but things took an unexpected turn. As soon as the priest saw Detective Young, he immediately ran away. Detective Young chased him down and found him in his room, frantically shoving something into his mouth. Detective Young punched him in the stomach and retrieved the item, which turned out to be a photo of Mi-jin. The floor was also scattered with photos of other young girls. This sight filled Detective Young with rage. He couldn't believe the innocent-looking priest could harbor such a monstrous side. The priest was soon taken to the interrogation room. During the investigation, it was revealed that the priest had a criminal past. While in medical school, he had assaulted a female classmate. His medical background aligned with the surgical cuts found on Mi-jin's body. The police also found a key piece of evidence in the priest's room, Mi-jin's underwear. Despite all the evidence, the priest refused to confess, claiming that Mi-jin had been harassing him. He said Mi-jin had come to the church on the day she disappeared to confess her feelings for him. Detective Young was infuriated by the priest's shameless behavior. The priest insisted he had reformed and was now truly repentant. Detective Young was disgusted and told the priest that the girl he had assaulted in medical school had committed suicide after receiving treatment, and her mother had also hanged herself in grief, leaving her terminally ill father behind. The priest was shocked upon hearing this. After a moment of disbelief, he broke down and confessed, but his words were vague. Everyone in the room was thrilled, except Detective Han, who questioned the validity of the confession. He believed that the priest was confessing to the previous assault case, not Mi-jin's murder. That night, Detective Han reviewed all the priest's records, which led him to a discovery. The next day, Detective Young learned that Detective Han had released the priest. Furious, he rushed to the police station, only to find the priest had been stabbed by Mi-jin's father. Though the priest survived, he would no longer face interrogation. Detective Young was enraged and tried to attack Detective Han, but their colleagues intervened. Detective Han explained that the underwear had been mailed to the priest by Mi-jin, and they had found the delivery slip to prove the priest had been telling the truth. Mi-jin had been harassing him. Furthermore, the priest had left medical school because he suffered from a severe blood phobia, which made it impossible for him to be the killer. The case seemed to hit a dead end, as the church was their only lead, and now it was gone. That evening, while practicing at the shooting range, Detective Young received a tip that turned the case around. A source told Detective Young that he had seen Mi-jin at a drug den, being taken away by a father-son duo. The source also gave him their address. With this critical information, the police began surveilling the drug den and quickly learned about the father and son. The son, Choi Min-ji, was 36 years old and rarely left his home. His 74-year-old father, Choi Sr., supported them by scavenging for trash. Their water consumption had skyrocketed last month to over 200 tons, and blood traces had been found in their van, evidence of multiple victims. Detective Young was convinced this was a serial killing case. However, the police couldn't arrest them outright, as the building was filled with dangerous criminals, drug dealers, gang members, and illegal residents. If they acted recklessly, it could lead to chaos. The chief assigned Detective Young to lead the operation and instructed him to avoid triggering a large-scale conflict. On the day of the operation, things went wrong. Gang members were watching the area, so Detective Young delayed giving the order. Meanwhile, Detective Han, growing impatient, suddenly took matters into his own hands. Without warning, he left the car, removed his earpiece, and walked towards the drug den. A female colleague tried to stop him, but she followed him inside. This reckless move threw Detective Young's entire plan into disarray. He angrily called out to Detective Han over the radio, but it was useless. Detective Young ordered the team to storm the building. Inside, Detective Han was stopped by a lookout, leading to a brawl that escalated quickly. The entire building erupted into chaos, but reinforcements arrived just in time to regain. Detective Young and his team rushed to the father and son's apartment and broke down the door. To their surprise, Choi Min-ji, the 7-foot-tall giant, calmly sat there, eating peanuts, unfazed by the guns pointed at. When they ordered him to stand up, he cooperated, raising his hands. The smirk on his face showed he wasn't intimidated at all. At this moment, Officer Han didn't notice anything. He carefully approached Choi Min-ji, ready to hand, but suddenly, Choi grabbed Officer Han and lifted him up. The others rushed in to help, but Choi quickly turned around and grabbed another officer, slamming him into the window. Officer Jong, the main was furious as he witnessed this because the one who died was one of his most valued junior colleagues. Jong frantically searched the room, determined to find undeniable evidence of Choi Min-ji's crimes, to bring justice for his fallen. Finally, Jong found a hidden door in a cupboard. When he opened it, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. The dark room smelled awful. Fatty parts were scattered casually on the shelves, blood-stained hooks, ropes, and drains filled with hair and nails. The room looked like a lift. Jong noticed a tape recorder on the table and pressed. Instantly, horrific screams filled the room. All these tapes be recordings of the victims? Jong turned to the blood-stained chair, and in his mind, he saw the victims sitting there, helplessly waiting for their deaths, while Choi Min-ji, beast, watched them with a smile. Jong felt heartbroken and wanted to cry. He couldn't imagine how many people had died in that room to fill all those tapes. A few days later, Jong's forensic doctor gave him the answer. Based on the blood analysis from the room, at least 30 people had died. She also mentioned something. During Choi Min-ji's autopsy, she found that his body was covered in scars, many of which were over 20 years old. From these scars, it was clear that Choi had likely been abused as both of his arms were badly burned, which had damaged his muscles and nerves, making it impossible for him to perform the precise cuts seen in the victims. Jong's wife suggested that maybe they had been wrong from the start. As Jong left the autopsy room, he couldn't stop thinking about what his wife had said. The monstrous image of Choi Min-ji in his mind began to blur, replaced by the image of Choi's father. It turned out that Jong's wife was right. 2 days later, the department head came with a report from the forensic department. The real killer wasn't Choi Min-ji, but his father, Choi the Elder, who was still on the news caused a public. Families of the victims gathered outside the police station, demanding that the police catch the real killer as soon as possible. At the end of the hall, Choi the Elder reached Jong's home, used a signal jammer to unlock the door, and entered the house. He grabbed one of Jong's wife's dresses and inhaled deep. He then turned on the sound system and cranked the volume to max. Into the living room, looking around nervously. At first, she didn't notice anything, but as she turned to leave, she saw a box of syringes on the table, and instantly, she knew something was wrong. She grabbed her phone and ran for the door, but it was too late. Choi the Elder had already marked her as his prey. The next day, an elderly man came to the police station to report seeing the wanted man, Choi the Elder, at his friend's veterinary. After confirming the man's story, the police quickly mobilized. Jong was the first to arrive near. He cautiously searched the area, unaware that Choi the Elder had sneaked up behind him, holding a syringe. Luckily, Jong reacted quickly, pushing Choi the Elder down and slamming him against the cupboard. Soon, Choi was too beaten to. Given his age, Choi didn't stand a chance against Jong. However, just when it seemed like the capture was complete, Jong suddenly collapsed. During their fight, Choi had secretly injected Jong with a muscle relaxant, and the effects were now kicking. Jong's muscles began to paralyze, and soon, even breathing would become difficult. Confident in his victory, Choi pulled out a tape recorder and pressed play. What came from the speaker was the agonizing screams of Jong's wife during her torture and murder. At that moment, Jong completely broke. He couldn't imagine the torment his wife had gone through before dying to make her scream like. But driven by those terrible sounds, Jong's eyes turned red, and he somehow found the strength to stand up. He found Choi the Elder and, without hesitation, pulled the trigger. Maybe that was the last thing he could do for his wife. When Officer Han arrived, he found Jong lying unconscious on the ground. Han stared at him for a long time, but no one knew what he was thinking. At the end of the story, Han finally became the department head as he had always wanted. Before leaving, a female colleague told Han something. This statement brought Han's thoughts back to that night. It turns out he had arrived at the scene much earlier and witnessed Zhang suffering from the poison, but instead of helping him immediately, Han had waited until the last moment. After all, with Zhang dead, the position of department head was guaranteed to be his. At that moment, Han released the beast within himself. Just like the film's title The Beast, everyone has a beast inside them, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed.